Today on Locked On Red Wings, the seat is hot on Derek Lalonde.
You're Locked On Red Wings, your daily podcast on the Detroit Red Wings. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Red Wings podcast. We are your hosts, Brian Fisher and Scotty Bentley. Scotty's the host over at Locked On Tigers, as well as a freelance journalist for the Detroit News, and I am the color commentator for Oakland University ACHA D1 men's hockey. This weekend, Scotty, another Rockers game I'll be filling in for on Saturday, the 23rd.
Look at you, man.
Yeah,
Look at you go.
Look at me. I'm a pro. Scotty, we got a lot to talk about today. Obviously, we have the games to recap, but as anyone would have heard on the cold open, it's time to have the uncomfortable conversation. And we'll talk about that in a second. It's probably going to be more of that than it is going to be a recap in this one. So stay tuned. Today's episode is brought to you by Indeed. Still searching for a great candidate for your company? Don't search, just match with Indeed. Kind of an appropriate title sponsor given the content of today's episode. Scotty, first thought, right? We always go first thought now that we've introduced that as a preamble before our difference makers on the weekend. And again, cold open kind of gives away what our first thought's going to be. But what's your first thought, buddy?
Yeah, I think I would be shocked if we didn't have the same first thought. Not because we discussed it in show prep before, but I think...
What? Us?
I think that this really is a thought that is permeating throughout the fan base, and that is how hot is the seat of Derek Lalonde. And I think that, the amazing thing is if you would have told me going into the weekend that that the Wings would have lost to the Ducks, and yet I would feel like the seat deserved to be hotter after the Kings loss than the Ducks loss, or like that carried more weight in this conversation, I probably would have laughed at you. And I think that might be true. Now, that's not to say that the Ducks loss isn't egregious. It is terrible. And it's certainly, if they do beat the Ducks this weekend, we probably aren't having this conversation. So I'm not saying it means nothing. Right. I'm not saying it means nothing or that it's just like we're going to gloss over it and pretend like it doesn't matter. It absolutely matters. And that's a team that you have no business losing to. And it was a horrific collapse. But that game against the Kings was legitimately one of the worst hockey games I have seen from a Red Wings team since like the peak of the rebuild. I'm talking like COVID year where they were on pace to be one of the worst teams in the history of hockey, and the season got cut short, and we'll never know if they would have achieved that. Like that, I'm talking about
it was a mercy kill
the year that right, the draft that they took Raymond, and like the season that we all got mad because they should have got the number 1 overall pick. Like that was one of the worst hockey games, or like maybe the Sens back to back, whatever that was last year, 2 years ago, like. That was an atrocity. That was horrific. And I think that the reason why we feel like this is a very appropriate time, aside from just the results on the box score over the weekend, is the way in which they lost, which is why I think the Kings game has so much weight to it. This is a system. We have heard nothing but the system that Lalonde is trying to integrate and to have be the personality of the Detroit Red Wings since he took over. We keep hearing about the system. He's been here for 2 seasons now, and
yeah, this is his third.
Right. This is year 3. And we have not seen that system actually be implemented. Or that's probably poor wording. I'm sure it's being implemented in practice. We haven't seen it be successful. And so I think that is the reason why we are here today and having this conversation, is because it's absurd to me that they still aren't playing the way that we were told they were going to play during the introductory press conference.
Yeah. God, I have so much I want to add to that. And I just have to like take it slow here and structure my thoughts. I want to just start off by saying, I mean, obviously what you were saying, I mean, I can think of worse games in all fairness, but your point is well taken in that this is the third year where we have been told that they want to play really strong defensive hockey. And, well, metrically, defensively, they're not doing half bad. It's not translating into offense, though. It's not translating into 5-on-5 puck possession. Right now, all they can do is defend. And that's not good enough. And it's the third year of this system. And for some of these players, it's their third year in this system that they're trying to play, and it's not working. And I want to be fair, right? Because there's a saying on local radio. I'm sure many of you in the Metro Detroit area probably listen a lot to the Valeni and Rico show. One thing that Mike says a lot is it's not his fault, but it is his problem in regards to Scott Harris. I feel like that applies here too. I don't think Steve Yzerman, and Max Bultman has written this in his articles, and I agree with him. I don't think Steve Yzerman has given him the best hand to work with. You know, this is a guy that Yzerman handpicked to be the head coach behind the bench of the Detroit Red Wings. He knew going in that he wanted him to play. He wanted to play this defensive system, and it was going to require heavy bodies to win those puck battles. And instead, he's filled the top six with small bodies. He's filled the top six with offense-first guys. Last year was all offense guys, all through the top 12. Or the top 12, the only 12 on offense. And, like, so it's not entirely his fault. Like, there is a legitimate argument here for professional scouting and the decisions Yzerman has made as general manager when it comes to the free agent signings. But it's still Lalonde's problem to maximize the players that he has or adjust if he sees that it's not working, and he's not. And unfortunately, when a team is underperforming, it's going to fall on coaching first. And this is where I say, like, Yzerman gets to fire Lalonde. And I'm going to make this is going to be a controversial statement. Yzerman gets to fire Lalonde, but that's your mulligan. Because if the next guy you bring in can't maximize this team's potential, not that this team's a Stanley Cup roster. I'm not disillusioned in that regard. Like, I understand what this roster is. It's probably a wild card roster at best, but they're not even playing to that caliber right now. Last year, when they saw the most success, it wasn't because of any 5-on-5 system. Their metrics at 5-on-5, they were a bottom 10 team. It was because they played a run-and-gun offense. It was scoring off the rush. They had an incredibly high PDO and shooting percentage. Like, everything was just going into the net, and they were outperforming. I said it last year. They were like the Sabres 2 years ago. They were outscoring their problems. This year, they're not outscoring their problems. They've regressed hard, and Lalonde hasn't gotten them out of the slump. And we demanded 4 points from this West Coast road trip. So even if they get the win against San Jose, that's still only 2 points. Technically, it's 4 points because Pittsburgh's part of the road trip, but I'm counting California. 2 of 6 in California. It's not good enough. And if you lose to San Jose and you go 0 for 3 in California against 2 of the worst teams in the league, like, then there's a legitimate conversation that this coaching staff just does not have, and you could see it. And there's obviously the argument to be had that, like, you were down Edvinsson, you're on the second half of back-to-back, and less than 24 hours later. There's the fatigue factor for sure, but this is a roster full of NHL talent, and how many times have we seen a team on a second half of back-to-back win a hockey game? Like, at a certain point, the excuses run out, and somebody needs to be held accountable. And the first person to be held accountable is always going to be the head coach. And after that, then you start looking up. And that's where we're at.
For sure. I agree. And I think I'll start off with this. I think if they lose to San Jose, I think he might be fired. Like, I'm not sure. I mean, that's the end of a road trip. You have 3 days off, right? Like, you don't two. You don't play again until Thursday after the Monday night game. I think he might. I think he might be if they were to lose to San Jose. If they win, I guess maybe we kick the can down the road and see if there's a turnaround or whatever. I think the biggest thing, and this is just an expansion on the point that I made earlier when I was rambling, was I think that my biggest frustration with this is that not only is it, okay, we're in the third season and this system still isn't being maximized or really like there's no success behind this system whatsoever. It's the fact that we don't even have a stretch of games over, again, now over 2 seasons that even remotely indicate that it could work. Like literally, there is not one. There isn't a month or a like a 10-game stretch at any point in his tenure that's like, oh wow, like they really possess the puck well in pick a month in February of like year 2. Like, oh man, like they really possess the puck really well then, and it at least showed you like some signs of hope. Like, no, it's what you said earlier, man. Like, even when they were really good last year, it wasn't because they were utilizing the system that we were told they were going to utilize. They were just they were just got a ton of depth scoring and still were getting outshot every night and still weren't possessing the puck ever, but had a bunch of goal scorers. And it's mind-boggling to me, really, that we're this far into this thing and there is not any sample size in his entire tenure that would lead you to believe, okay, if we can just get the right personnel in here, if we can just get this going, or if these players can these young players can develop into this type of, athlete or this type of forward or whatnot, that this system will work. We have zero evidence that this system is actually going to work at any point. Literally,
they play stretches of a game where you'll see it. The Ducks game, for example, there was a huge stretch of that game they looked like the better team, and they should. And that loss isn't on the 5-on-5 play. We'll get into it, I'm sure. We'll break that down a little bit more. But like, to your point, right? Like last year, they had an Yzerman era high 6-game win streak. And if you look at the expected goals for percentage in those games, there's only 2 of those games where they came out ahead at 5-on-5 at expected goals for percentage. Not even. Yeah. No, they had 2. It was 25% against the sorry.
No, and then they lost 7 straight after.
Yeah, and they lost 7 straight after.
So they only possessed the puck well in 2 of those 6 wins, and then went on a 7-game losing streak.
Right. So in their 5-0 victory over the Flames, they had an expected goals for percentage of 25%. Against the 4-3 win against the Kraken, it was 35%. The 2-1 win, the thriller against the Avalanche, where Kane scored the OT winner, that was 42.97%. The big win, 6-1 over the Blues, that was a game you dominated, 64%. You had the OT winner against the Blackhawks, again, another thriller with Patrick Kane, 38%, and you capped that win streak off with an 8-3 domination of the Capitals with a 54% at 5-on-5. So only in your 2 blowouts did you carry water in that hockey game at 5-on-5. The rest of those games, you were the one who was losing the 5-on-5 battle.
And again, that's been the reoccurring theme of this entire era, despite the fact that it's supposed to be the opposite. The system's supposed to be the opposite. And if there was literally any stretch of games, I don't care if it ended up being that 6-game stretch, if it's a random 10-game stretch in October one year, like if there was any sign of evidence that this can happen someday, I would have a significantly different tone with this. But like, there's literally not a single stretch where you're like, oh yeah, like they really were cooking and this looked how we thought it was supposed to look, for this month of the season or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. We got to go to our first break. We're over. So when we come back, anything you got left to say, we can, and we can just get into the games themselves. Stay tuned to segment 2 of Locked On Red Wings. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long with Prize Picks. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. Prize Picks puts its members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, secure, and easy to use. When my picks hit, I can get my money in as quick as 15 minutes. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't need to win to receive that $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game. Segment 2, Locked On Red Wings podcast. All right, Scotty, the one last thing I want to say about the Derek Lalonde thing, it's basically just a recap, and so I'll move on very quickly. But again, in all fairness to Lalonde, this is not his problem. It's not his fault, but it is his problem. I don't think Yzerman's helped him out at all with the roster construction, but at some point you got to adjust. I do feel bad because I have carried water for Lalonde. I've given him patience, right? Even after the collapse last year, I was like, well, they also had a 6-game winning streak. So like I've tried to be fair and I've tried to be patient, and I've always said the third season is the litmus test. And if it starts going south fast, you got to make a decision quickly or the season's lost. And American Thanksgiving is, 2 weeks away now? I think the decision has to come soon. You're either sticking it out with him until the end of the season, or you're making a move and trying to save the season.
Yeah, I agree, man. I'm really right there with you. And I do not think that that Yzerman is, free of criticism. That's as I'll reiterate your point, there's a lot of personnel decisions that are very questionable given the system that they were trying to run. But I think, yeah, I'll end with the point I've said about a billion times. It's just there's no evidence that this is ever going to be a system that works for this organization.
Yeah. All right, Scotty, let's move on to the games itself. Let's start with Anaheim. I hate to be this guy. Well, no, we have two clear difference makers, I feel, in this hockey game.
Sure.
I'm going to go first.
Okay. Please. I always go first. So you go first.
I think the clear one, first of all, is the penalty kill. This is another game. The disillusion is gone. You have one of the worst penalty kills in the league. I kept saying top 10 penalty kill last year.
How did this happen?
What is
going on, dude?
They literally don't
know.
That the Ducks have the worst power play in the NHL, and you gave up 2 penalty kill goals against them.
And just the lowest scoring offense, period, in the NHL.
They scored 6.
They scored
their season high
on you and scored twice on the power play.
And
how did this happen? It's the same people. It's the
craziest
same personnel, same coaching. Everything's the same. I almost just dropped an F-bomb there. That was close. Everything's the same. I don't get it, dude. Genuinely, that it's the most mind-boggling part of the team.
And that's like something like last year as a problem too, is not showing up against opponents that are worse than you. Last year you lost to the Coyotes twice, who rest in peace. You lost to the Sharks once in overtime after blowing a huge win.
Sharks, you say?
Yeah. Who we play tomorrow. Today, by the time people are listening. And the thing, too, is at 5-on-5, the Red Wings actually were the better team. That is factual. All the analytics say it. And if you watch the game, they were the better team. But as soon as they took a penalty, and they could not stop taking penalties, they took 4 in this game, they got scored on. And that's unacceptable against the worst. Trevor Zegras had 1 goal going into this hockey game. 1.
Yeah, my other difference maker is going to be Alex Lyon, who struggled mightily in this one. I think it's pretty clear that Talbot is goalie 1. He's been phenomenal this year. We'll talk about him when we get to the Kings game here in a second. He's been great. Lyon has just been inconsistent. He's had some games, right, that's Lyon. What has been his whole professional hockey career. He's had stretches where he's been phenomenal, and he's had stretches where you look around and you understand his placement on the organization and on the depth chart. And I think that this was just the latter, where it's okay, he will have good games again, and those are going to be great, and we'll take them whenever we can get them. But that's the reason why he isn't the goalie 1 and Talbot is.
Yeah, I mean, he gave up 5 goals on 28 shots, and at least 2 of those were rough. The Zegras goal, when he was it went short side, right on him. And then there was the goal. He had another puck that went short side on him. It's like, dude, what are you doing? Like, where are you going? And like, I'm not gonna rail on Lyon because he's still on a fantastic value contract, and more nights than not, he's solid. But that was a game where you needed Lyon to just be fine, and he was not good enough. But again, the overarching thing is like your penalty kill sucks, and that's another thing. It's like, well, your coaching needs to change if you can't figure out the penalty kill because there's too much talent. There were, though, positives in this game. As much as it is struggled to say it after this weekend, Marco Kasper, first NHL goal, and it was a goal scorer's goal.
Beauty. Absolute beauty, man. Absolute ripper. Yeah, that was great. Great setup, too. Everything about that was beautiful.
Yeah. It was very nice goal. Another power play goal. The power play keeps on humming. Bet top 10 power play in the league. Just, again, mind-boggling that they can't score at 5-on-5 when they have so much offensive output on the power play. I mean, I get it, you're up a man, so you have that advantage, but they score so well in the power play. It's kind of insane. Jonathan Berggren also got another power play goal for the Red Wings. That's his second of the season. So I think I tweeted out mistakenly because admittedly I was at the Oakland hockey game at the time, so I wasn't necessarily watching. I didn't know they were power play goals at first. I'll admit it. I said the third line's finally breaking through. The players who play on the third line are breaking through on the power play. But it was really nice to see, again, just those guys getting rewarded because even though the Red Wings have struggled mightily this season so far, that third line has been one of the few lines that consistently produces opportunities.
There.
Yeah.
For sure. Agreed.
Cool. They did lose Simon Edvinsson in this game. He blocked a shot and didn't return. And
yeah, they said he was already kind of
dealing with something.
Yeah. Well, I guess that was before the Kings game. But yeah, man, you look at his reaction after he blocked the shot. He was hobbling. And yeah, that ended up not playing against the Kings, and that was a complete disaster of a hockey game. So
right, and I think that's a great transition to move into the Kings because, I mean, we've spent so much time on Lalonde, we kind of have to speed run these recaps. He did, I think it was really reassuring that he was out there for warm-ups, even if he didn't play, because that, to me, indicates that there's no structural damage. And again, I'm speculating. I'm making an assumption. But if anything, it's like maybe a bad bruise and he's day-to-day. So that was reassuring to me to see that he was out there attempting to play the next day. I think they said that, there was confirmation that both he and Rasmussen, who was a scratch against the Kings, should be good to go for Monday. So the worst has been avoided in terms of Edvinsson, at least.
Right. Yeah. Thank goodness. We'll take it.
Yeah. And so with that, we'll head to segment 3. We'll talk about the Kings as well as quickly mention the Jack Campbell thing. So stay tuned to Locked On Red Wings. God dang it. I did it again.
Really?
Dude, I don't know. I just want to get out of here. We're driven by the search for better, but when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. And Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences, so the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/locked-on. Just go to Indeed.com/locked-on right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed.
Indeed you do.
Hit the right button that time.
Proud of you.
Thanks, buddy. Segment 3, Locked On Red Wings podcast. All right, Scotty. Recapping the game against the Kings, what was your difference maker in that one? It's hard to have one, honestly.
Say what?
It's actually hard to have one in this game.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I guess I'll go with honestly, like I feel like this is one where it's kind of fair to do and just say the lack of puck possession and the lack of the system that we kind of talked about at the beginning. Like they did not have the puck ever, man. Like they didn't have the puck ever, and then when they did, it never resulted in a shot on net. They had 10 shots going into the third period. They had 10 shots on net. I jokingly,
yes, I'm about to say that was great.
was doing like the countdown to double-digit shots. We had like 4 minutes left in the second period, and it was at 9, man. Like it was awful. It really was. That was some of the worst like transition game, zone entry, all of it grouped into one. So like one specific difference maker, I guess I'll just kind of like cop out and just say the 5-on-5 play.
You know, I was going to cop out too and just say Adrian Kempe because he had 2 goals in this game. But actually, I think thinking about it, I have a legitimate difference maker, and that is the lack of Simon Edvinsson. You saw how badly this team needs it the moment you got Sherratt back together. Then you had Justin Holl and Jeff Petrie as your second pair, Albert Johansson and Eric Gustafsson as your third pair. The deployment of Seider and Sherratt in this game was insane. The moment you lost one of your top defenders and you had to move Sherratt up, those bottom 2 pairs just got sheltered so much. Guys, Moritz Seider played over 10 minutes in the first period. He played over half of the first period alone.
Genuinely one of the most unbelievable stats I've ever heard.
And like the other thing too is look at the defensive zone faceoffs in this game. If I can pull up the game against the Kings here real quick. It is crazy. At 5-on-5, Scotty, Seider and Sherratt took 15 defensive zone faceoffs. The next highest was Patrick Kane at 9 with his line of JT Compher and Andrew Kopp. That shows how little faith this coaching staff has in anyone not named Moritz Seider and Simon Edvinsson. That when you have to, we always talk about the trickle down of depth. When you have to trickle up that depth and move a guy up, and you have to then move one of your usual healthy scratches into a playing position, he does not trust anyone else in the defensive zone. That is, one, incredibly unfair to Moritz Seider, who has been doing a fantastic job this season alongside Simon Edvinsson, and it's very damning of, again, the roster construction, because, again, this is another situation where that's not Lalonde's fault. He's given the hands he's dealt with, but it's also like, that's asinine usage. Like, you can't, I mean, I guess you can because you did, but you can't just give Seider those defensive zone deployments. Like, you're going to kill him. You're going to run him into the ground. And also, like, I understand why you have JT Compher or Andrew Kopp getting all those defensive zone faceoffs, but get Patrick Kane off that line. And I know eventually they did shuffle up those lines, unless I'm confusing with the Ducks game. But Patrick Kane, who is already on the season, we talked about it, been one of the worst 5-on-5 players on the team, to give him the most defensive zone faceoffs out of anyone on the forward core is crazy. That's a situation where I'm like, that's just coaching. Like, you got to then, and I think eventually they moved Marco Kasper up. No, they moved Kane down and moved Bergeron up and put Kane on the third line with Kasper and Tarasenko. That's fine. As long as you're like, but you have to know what you have there. And that's 2 offensive-oriented guys. You can't be deploying Kane exclusively in the D zone. Just because the other 2 forwards on that line, you need to be there. At that point, like, it's the writing's on the wall, right?
Yeah, at least with the Kings game, I can somewhat appreciate, just because everything was so awful. Like, hey, let's try this. But those things you pointed out were at the start of the game. Like, that is the reason it was so awful, was because of those decisions. So,
bro, and you want to know the craziest part about that? Like, I just went on this like huge rant about like how they're utilizing Seider in that game. Like, he wasn't even the worst player on the ice at Corsi for percentage, like, or expected goals for. Dude, Fisher and Veleno had an expected goals for percentage of 4.5 and 7. Like, and I get that they have a lot less minutes, but that's just. That Kings game was a disaster with the exception of Cam Talbot. Cam Talbot had a .925 save percentage in that game.
It's been a great addition, man. Like I voiced my concerns about goalie all year, and like that is the last thing on my mind now, right? Like when I think of the flaws of this team and what I think the Wings need to improve on, and a lot of the conversation we just had, right? Like not very much of that falls on goaltending. Improved goalie play is very, very far down on the list of reasons why or like things that need to happen for the Wings to improve here the rest of the way. And nearly all of that credit goes to Talbot. Obviously, Lions had got off to a good start and has had a lot of really good games too. But Talbot's been phenomenal. And like I had serious concerns about whether he was going to be able to be a 1A, like a true number one goalie for a team. And he has put that to rest pretty early on here. He's legitimately been one of the best goalies in the NHL.
Right. That's like statistically speaking. That's not just bias. Like,
right.
But speaking of goalies, Jack Campbell was cleared to return from the National Hockey League Player Assistant Program, and he was subsequently put on waivers by the Detroit Red Wings. And if he clears, which I assume he will, but if he clears, he'll be sent down to the Grand Rapids Griffins. And now, what do you do? This is where that situation of signing all those goalies kind of is like, what do you do here? Because now you're going to have Kosa and Husso and Campbell all in AHL. And, there's enough games between two goalies, but if you want to give Sebastian Kosa the starting role and give him all the games you can, you don't want to enter a new goalie into the mix. What do you do here? What are we doing?
I don't know. I think that there's a chance that they go back to 3 goals in the NHL.
I mean, you could, but Husso's one start in the NHL didn't inspire confidence that he can.
No, certainly not.
I understand Lane just had a rough game, but
that's really that, or you make a move. Maybe you let Campbell go so that he can sign anywhere, and a team that needs goalie depth more, give him that freedom and that opportunity. Those are really the only 2 routes I see here.
Yeah. Here's your preview for the Sharks. Win.
You better, man. That's the worst team in hockey, so
maybe not.
All right, chill.
Sorry, I'm salty. All right, we'll be back with a new episode tomorrow, recapping the game against the Sharks, so stay tuned for that. Same time, same place.
We ball.
Oh, wait. We ball. Sorry, Scotty. Ahead of myself. Every day.